Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. You can probably tell by the background I've escaped from the People's Republic of Illinois. I was able to sneak out. I'm in the Rio Grande Valley of southern Texas for a while because it's warmer here and it's a little freer here and kind of a nice diversion. There's a Border Patrol vehicle just up there about 100 yards, not too far from the Rio Grande River. I want to talk to you today not on necessarily a gun-related topic, but on, I think, an important topic. This is the final resting place of the veterans that I'm going to talk about today. A couple of weeks ago I was invited to a gathering in Texas, but about 500 miles north of here. And it was a rare opportunity that I wanted to take advantage of. It also fit in with a kind of a troublesome thing I've seen develop in some of the comments of my videos. It is surprising to me that the folks who watch my videos would be anti-police, but it's really kind of an unusual video when I don't get some kind of snide anti-police comment. And to me, these are gun folks. These are generally supporters of law enforcement. So I'm not sure what's going on. I think a lot of these people are probably what we in law enforcement call frequent flyers, that they're just the kind of people who, whenever they get close to the cops, there's going to be trouble, and a lot of times they end up being the ones in trouble, so they don't like cops. I could be wrong. I really don't think the good people of this country have that much of an anti-police sentiment. I guess I could be wrong. Now, I have not picked up on anti-military comments, but I think over the next 4 years we're going to see our military folks work in more police-oriented type jobs in this country as President Trump cracks down on illegal drugs coming into the country, illegal migrants coming into the country, and things like that. We've already seen active duty military headed for where I am now on the border in Texas. So it's possible that these same people also may not like the military, which really goes against what I believe in. But let's make no mistake, there is a war on in the police. There has been for at least 4 years, and it's real. As of this morning, there were 13 line-of-duty deaths for police officers in the United States. There were 163 last year. Now, not all of these are what we call felonious killings, where police officers are being murdered by bad guys. Some of them, they die in traffic accidents, they die of heart attacks. All those things are lumped into those numbers. The felonious death numbers for 2024 are not out that I'm aware of, and so we'll see. But it could be, it's probably going to be well over 100. There was one comment. My videos the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been talking about the NRA Board of Directors election. I am on the ballot to run for the NRA Board of Directors. And one guy made a comment, said, before you vote for this guy, remember he was a cop. So he's one of those guys out there throwing innocent Second Amendment people in jail for minor violations. And I replied, and I don't normally reply to comments like that. I did to this guy, and I said, okay, tell me one somewhere, anywhere, where that occurred. Because for the vast majority of cops, 99.9% of them are good, and 99.8% of them are pro-gun. And they're just not going to put innocent gun owners in jail strictly for Second Amendment reasons. There's going to have to be some other kind of crime involved. That's just the reality. You can run your mouth all you want, but I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to come up with those statistics. Now, certainly there are red flag laws out there. I've had videos on red flag laws. I've lost subscribers over what I said on some of those. I am opposed to red flag laws in general. I am specifically opposed to any that don't involve due process for the gun owner. But I told a story where a case justified it. There are some people in our society that quite frankly shouldn't have guns. They're mentally ill, they're vicious criminals. They're a very small part of the population, but they are there, and there needs to be a system to get guns away from them when it's appropriate. But there needs to be due process to prove that that's legitimate. But I'll tell you, for 40 plus years, I've spent my entire life working around military, police, firefighters, emergency medics, paramedics. These are the finest people I've ever known. They are the finest people in this country, and they deserve your respect. So I was invited to a gathering. The ranch that hosted this, the gentleman that owns that is a retired Border Patrol official from many years ago. He was also a platoon leader in Vietnam with the Army, so he has both federal law enforcement and a military background. Most of the people invited to this gathering were law enforcement officers of one type or another, and most of them had military experience. Some of it extensive military experience. Most of the military folks there were Army. There was one Marine, there was one Navy. There was nobody there for the Air Force, but we would have let them in because, you know, being in the Air Force is kind of like being in the military. I'm just kidding. Don't get upset. At least when the invitation came, they said it's a hog hunt. We get together every year on President's Day weekend, and we hunt hogs, and we eat some good food, and we drink some adult beverages, and we have a great time. I think mostly it was just a chance to reconnect because no hog showed up this year, so we barbecued a brisket, not a hog. The senior dude, and this is the guy who invited me, and we joked with Bob that you know that he was probably a corporal when he charged up San Juan Hill with Teddy Roosevelt. He'd been around that long, but Bob turned out to be a pretty good cook, which I wasn't aware of. I had worked with this guy at the Illinois State Police, and as another part of his life, he was a Green Beret. He had served Special Forces in Vietnam, and I'm still not quite sure how, but he talked himself back onto active duty after September 11th, coming up on the age of 60, and he served a couple years in Afghanistan, attached to a SEAL team in the global war on terrorism. He also worked for a number of years as a firearms instructor at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and I think that's where he became associated with the guys who do this gathering every year. Now, these folks ranged in age from 21 and maybe 23 to 70 plus. One young man was a son of one of the retired Border Patrol guys. He's currently in the police academy for an agency in the Midwest. There were several lifetimes of law enforcement and military experience present in this gathering of guys. And it was a rare treat for me to be there. We're down here, Texas, with a camper, so we took the camper up there. My wife was there. She got to meet a lot of these guys, and she had never been exposed to men of this caliber, and she loved it. There were two active duty Army folks there. They were Special Forces doctors, full bird colonels. One of them was 2 or 3 months from retirement. One, I think, is about 1.5 years. The interesting thing about them is that these are the doctors who run the training system for the Special Forces medics. And if you know anything about Green Beret medics, or even further into, you know, Delta medics, I've heard all my life that if you're really screwed up and shot somewhere, probably the most likely person to keep you alive to get to the hospital is going to be a Special Forces medic. maybe even more so than an emergency room doctor. These guys are the best there are. And my wife's a retired RN, so she just loved to talk to them about the kind of training these guys get and what they can do in the military. They can't do it in civilian life. They can't treat people the way they can in their military job, but they can perform almost like a doctor. Now, as I said, there was a heavy Border Patrol presence at this gathering. I think that's it came from this Border Patrol guy that owned the ranch. These people were all shooters. Several of them were active firearms instructors, a lot of SWAT experience. I believe a couple of them were Border Patrol BORTAC members at one time or another, and I've had the chance to go to their training facility one time and see how those folks work, and they're great. It's my understanding some BORTAC guys are the ones that eventually ended the school shooting at Uvalde, Texas, when they were able to get there. A lot of cutting-edge firearms technology there, state-of-the-art rifles, thermal equipment, nods. The active duty Border Patrol guys, of course, brought along all their current issue stuff, so there was lots of toys to look at. Now, I tell of going to this gathering not to brag, because I'm telling you, these people, for the most part, were way beyond my skill set in either law enforcement or military. So I'm pretty humbled to be around veterans of this caliber. Even one of the doctors had started out his military career in the 2nd of 75th Rangers. Just an enlisted Ranger dude. Most of these experienced veterans, like the ones I met in the military, and I was in 78, 79, and I learned pretty quickly, that was not too long after Vietnam, and the guys who were in the shit, so to speak, in Vietnam, they didn't tell a lot of stories. But when there was a reason for them to wear their Class A uniforms, and you see all the ribbons they had, these were the guys with the Purple Hearts and the Silver Stars, and they didn't have much to say. The guys who wanted to tell you all their Vietnam War stories, when you sorted it all out, a lot of times they were cooks or truck drivers or somebody who probably didn't ever see any combat. The ones who have been there and done it are pretty humble people. So it takes a while for the stories to come out. I think my wife in particular was pretty mesmerized to sit here and listen to some of these guys talk. One thing about everybody who was there, from the youngest kid in the police academy to Bob, the guy who charged up San Juan Hill, allegedly, they are probably the most devout Second Amendment supporters you'll ever want to be around. So to say that law enforcement in general, or the military in general, is anti-Second Amendment, couldn't be more wrong. Now, to the anti-cop crowd out there are certainly bad cops. There are arrogant cops. I've worked with them. I've dealt with them. I've got at least one of them fired for their behavior over the years. I have stopped a couple of excessive use of force situations. So I know there are some out there, but the vast majority of American law enforcement officers, now I'm primarily talking here state and local, they are dedicated protectors of society. Something I learned, because I'd not been around a lot of Border Patrol folks, that there are really kind of two different types of federal law enforcement. The ones that I had always been involved with were FBI, ATF, Secret Service, and folks like that. They do investigations, they make arrests of criminals. But the Border Patrol was really very different. One Border Patrol guy, and this guy was a retired Army Ranger and a retired Border Patrol officer. And he said, I could never be a local cop. I could never be out there dealing with the public the way you have to deal with those idiots all the time. He dealt with illegal aliens. He dealt with smugglers his whole career. So 98% of the people he dealt with were bad guys. They were all alike, so to speak. Where state, local cops, and to some degree the investigative types in the federal law enforcement system, they have to deal with all kinds of people, and they have to sort out who are the good ones, who are the bad ones, who deserves to be treated well, who deserves to be treated like criminals. But here's the point. I think most of these people are amazing patriots, They are the reason why you can run your mouth online. In another country, you could be put in prison for what you say about government enforcers. That doesn't happen here, with the possible exception of January 6th. And there again, that was federal law enforcement, not state or local. They buy the freedom that you have. They buy the right for you to be a jerk, essentially. Maybe that election of 2020 was part of God's overall plan. Maybe Trump needed to lose to learn more about how the federal government worked. The things had to get so bad under Biden that most of the country would fall in behind Trump and say, things have to change. And give him the kind of win he needed to have a mandate. So we think the election was stolen, but we think it probably was for the best overall. Now, if you don't like what Trump is doing, that's okay. Roughly half the country doesn't. But if you don't like what Trump is doing, you're part of the problem. Just today, a couple hours before I filmed this, there was a meeting with Zelensky from the Ukraine, who was pretty arrogant and thought apparently that he was going to come over here and tell us what kind of a deal he was going to make with the United States. And Donald Trump and J.D. Vance threw his ass out of the White House. Now, from my point of view, what this points up is more of the Biden-era corruption, because we know the Biden family was paid off to the tune of millions upon millions of dollars from different aspects of the Ukrainian system. So they bought and paid for the Biden administration, and they got to tell them what to do. They got what they wanted. Well, they're not getting what they wanted now. It remains to be seen if they'll come crawling back to Trump and give in to his ideas of how to proceed. But we have a president now who's not afraid to throw people out if they're out of line. So if you don't like that, that kind of falls into the tough category. Our military needs to be purged of woke hierarchy. They need to be returned to war fighting, and that is being done. Just a few days ago, when Trump fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I contacted a buddy of mine who is a retired Air Force officer, flew Academy grad, flies for Southwest Airlines now. And I said, what do you think of the firing of this guy? And he said, this guy was the most racist officer he was ever aware of serving in the United States Air Force. Big supporter of Black Lives Matter, was actively trying to wash white pilots out of the Air Force so that he could put more black pilots in place even if they weren't qualified to do the job. That is what our military had become. That is what our federal law enforcement agencies, to a large extent, have become. They also need to be purged of that woke hierarchy, and they need to be returned to legitimate enforcement missions, not out to get the citizens of the United States. So for those of you, whoever it was that made the comment that, hey, he was a cop, he's one of those guys throwing innocent Second Amendment people in jail. It isn't the cops that do that. It's not the state police or the county police or the local police. If anyone is doing that, it's the feds. It's the ATF, the FBI, and some of those agencies. And I have faith, I have hope that we can turn them around. So I think all of these cops deserve your respect until they show a reason for you not to respect them. And as far as I'm concerned, no matter who wears the badge, whatever shape it is, whatever color it is, they're all law enforcement. I used to make a joke in classes I taught at the State Police Academy that we'd have game wardens and folks in there. And I said, hey, even the possum cops are cops too. I can tell you a couple of phenomenal stories about game wardens who saved other officers' lives by jumping into gunfights and doing what needed to be done. The color of uniform doesn't matter. It's the color of their patriotism and their heart. And I'm telling you, 99.9% of the people out there wearing the badge deserve your respect. Our military needs to be empowered to protect our homeland, including the destruction of border problems and the cartels. If we get to the point that Mexico will not cooperate, then I think we should send Delta and the SEALs and Apache gunships into Mexico to destroy those Mexican cartels. We're going to do it for us. We're also going to do it for Mexico, whether they want it done or not. Those people are some of the most heinous, well-organized criminals in the history of the world. There is only one solution to them, and that is to destroy them. That's what has to be done. Wasn't a Border Patrol chopper, but it had a government seal on it of some kind. So the border is still active, folks. It's not completely sealed yet. They're still working on it. I think officers and senior enlisted NCOs in the military should be able to go armed whenever they choose. On base, off base, on duty, off duty. That would put hundreds of thousands of armed protectors out there on the street and on their military bases. Now, those folks are going to need training. They're trained to fight wars. They are not trained necessarily as either concealed carry folks, and they're certainly, for the most part, not trained as law enforcement officers. So they should get that kind of training. The security on many military bases in our country is an absolute joke. My Air Force friend, retired in California, lives not too far from Travis Air Force Base. And for a video I did last summer about the potential for attack on military bases, I said, what would it take to take Travis Air Force Base? He said, I think 12 to 20 well-trained armed individuals could take the whole base. 12 to 20 armed individuals with good training could take an Air Force base. That's just his opinion. I'm sure Air Force officials would disagree with that. But when he ran down the list of who was active on that base with a gun, 12 to 20 was about the number he came up with. So we need to up the security on our bases, and one of the easiest, quickest ways to do that is simply to arm the senior folks in the military and have them trained about how to deal with those kind of situations. If they can be armed in a war zone, why the hell can't they be armed at home? Our society has got to be returned to traditional values. We've got to restore the trust in our protectors so that if you are one of those people who's had bad experiences with law enforcement of any type, we need to fix that. I think we need nationwide concealed carry, reciprocity for everyone. I think we need reduced restrictions on where those weapons can be carried. I think a lot of weaponry like short barrel rifles and suppressors, those are not gangster guns. They should be taken out of the NFA. They should be available to anyone who wants them. Over the counter. What harm do they do? But they give you the kind of hearing protection you need, the kind of compact weaponry you might need to carry as a truck gun to defend your own home. We need to open these things back up. Trump 2.0, in my opinion, is our chance to push the little handle and flush out the craziness that has built up in our society over the last few decades. But make no mistake, those turds will resist. And the more they lose, the louder they scream. For the politician, term limits are essential. We need to bring criminal charges against these corrupt politicians. AOC from New York was supposedly a broke bartender when she got elected, but is worth over $100 million now. You don't do that by being honest. Adam Schiff from California, as far as I'm concerned, that lying, treasonous bastard should be tied to a tree and horsewhipped. Maybe not. Maybe that's too violent. But he should certainly be thrown out of Congress and thrown out of any elected office in the state of California. He is an embarrassment to everyone in the society, particularly the Democratic Party. But we don't see those politicians who are criminals hardly ever go to jail. Mike Madigan was the Speaker of the Illinois House. This man was corrupt as the day was long, and had been all the years he'd been in charge of the House in the Illinois legislature. He had survived one federal prosecution only because they found out that Illinois law had been changed and the kind of corruption he was dealing with had been made legal. But they got him this time. They got him convicted on about half of the felony federal counts they had against him. Will he go to jail? He's an old man. He'll claim ill health. He'll claim everything he can. But as far as I'm concerned, that man should live the rest of his life in prison. And Illinois takes the cake. At one time, we had 2 consecutive governors, both in federal prison at the same time, one Democrat, one Republican. Trump commuted the sentence of Rod Blagojevich, which I happen to completely disagree with. I think that sucker should have stayed in prison for the full sentence that he was given by federal judge. But Trump saw fit to commute his sentence. But people like Madigan and Blagojevich and the Clintons and Schiff and all the others who are so corrupt, they need to be investigated, they need to be prosecuted, and they need to be made to pay. That will go a long way towards changing the culture of our American society. I think the future of our country is very bright. But as I said, probably close to half of the people don't agree. And they will resist to every extent that they can. We've got to defeat the other 50% in the arena of ideas and at the ballot box. No physical violence. We don't need to. They're wimps. They'll fold. But we need to beat them back and shut their mouths so that the rest of the people can hear what's going on. Hear the truth. There have been several successful lawsuits against our completely corrupt mainstream media. So it's possible that they're going to be shut down to a large extent as well. That's why I say the future is bright. Things in this country can get changed. It took us a long time to get to where we were, to get to as screwed up as we were. So it's going to take a long time to fix it. That's my thoughts. This is not gun related, I understand. This is political, and sometimes my political oriented videos don't do very well. But it needed to be said. I had the chance to spend 4 days with some of the finest individuals this country has ever produced. I did not measure up to them in so many ways. It was an honor for me to be there. Now, a couple of them knew of me because of my writings in the police magazines over the years and things like that, and that was quite an honor and a humbling experience. I've been invited back. I'll probably be there again. Be nice to shoot a hog along the way, but mostly just to spend time with these kind of people. If you ever get the chance to spend time with the 1 or 2% of the population who give you the rights you have, including the rights to run your mouth on the internet, spend time with those people. And the smartest thing you can do is just be respectful and be quiet and listen. Listen to them when they get to the point of telling you what they believe, tell you what's in their hearts. And I think you will agree with them that these are some of the finest people this country has ever produced. Folks, I want to remind you that the voting for the NRA Board of Directors, National Rifle Association Board of Directors, is still ongoing. I believe the deadline for getting the ballots in is April 6th. If you are a voting member, you got a ballot in your magazine. Surrounding it is an ad showing 28 folks who are NRA reformers. The group is called Elect a New NRA. And they have a website, electanewnra.com. Look them up. You can vote for up to 28 candidates. I ask you to vote for me, and I ask you to vote for them. Let's turn the NRA around the way I think Donald Trump is going to turn our country around. Let's take us back to the glory days that we all knew in our youth. Thanks for watching, folks. Texas is nice and warm today. Almost too warm for me. Y'all be safe out there.
Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.